When emotions run deep, behavior often becomes confusing. Most people assume that loving someone a lot means constant communication, consistent attention, and emotional availability, but human psychology doesn't always work that way. In fact, the stronger the emotional attachment, the more likely it is for withdrawal to appear at certain moments. Not because the feelings are weak, but because they are intense. Deep emotional attachment creates vulnerability. When someone realizes they care more than they expected, it can feel destabilizing. Love has the power to shift priorities, expose fears, and reduce emotional control. For many people, that loss of control is uncomfortable. Ignoring or pulling back becomes a way to slow things down internally, to regain balance, and to protect themselves from feeling overwhelmed. This withdrawal is rarely conscious or strategic, it's a nervous system response. Strong feelings activate fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of being hurt, or fear of being seen too clearly. Instead of leaning in, the mind creates distance as a safety mechanism. Silence becomes a buffer. Space becomes a form of emotional regulation. Another layer is identity protection. When someone falls deeply, they may feel like they're losing themselves. Their thoughts revolve around one person, their mood depends on interactions, and their emotional stability feels threatened. Pulling away helps them restore a sense of autonomy. Ignoring isn't about punishment, it's about self preservation. This is why the behavior often feels contradictory. One moment there's warmth, depth, and connection. The next moment there's distance, silence, or emotional absence. The feelings didn't disappear, they intensified, and intensity, when unmanaged, creates the urge to step back. It's important to understand that love doesn't always express itself as pursuit. Sometimes it expresses itself as restraint, especially in people who aren't fully emotionally secure. Love can trigger avoidance. The closer they feel, the more space they think they need to breathe. This dynamic is often misunderstood and misinterpreted. The person on the receiving end assumes disinterest, disrespect, or manipulation, but reacting emotionally to this withdrawal only reinforces the need for distance. Pressure amplifies fear. Demands increase overwhelm. What feels like reassurance to one person feels like suffocation to another. Human psychology seeks equilibrium. When emotions spike too high, behavior swings in the opposite direction to restore balance. That's why ignoring can follow intimacy, distance can follow closeness. It's not healthy love at its best, but it is common love in its unrefined state. The key is recognizing that deep feelings don't always show up cleanly. Sometimes they show up as silence, sometimes they show up as confusion. And understanding this prevents you from taking emotional withdrawal personally or reacting in ways that push someone even further away. Because when you realize that intense attachment often creates distance before it creates stability, you stop panicking and start responding with emotional intelligence instead. When emotions grow stronger, the fear of losing control often grows right alongside them. Most people don't talk about this, but it's one of the biggest reasons someone who clearly cares can suddenly go quiet. Love has a way of exposing how much power another person has over your emotional state. And for someone who values control, independence, or emotional safety, that realization can feel threatening. Mixed signals are usually the result of internal conflict. On one side, there's desire, attachment, and emotional pull. On the other side, there's fear of getting hurt, fear of investing too much, fear of being the one who cares more. When these two forces collide, behavior becomes inconsistent. Attention comes and goes. Warmth is followed by silence. Presence is followed by distance. It's not intentional confusion, it's unresolved tension. Ignoring becomes a way to manage that fear. By pulling back, a person creates emotional space where they can breathe again. They regain a sense of control over their thoughts and feelings. Silence reduces intensity. Distance dulls vulnerability. It gives them time to convince themselves that they're not too invested. In their mind, ignoring is not rejection, it's regulation. This is especially true for people who associate emotional exposure with past pain. If opening up once led to disappointment, betrayal, or loss, the nervous system remembers. When love begins to feel deep again, old defenses reactivate, withdrawal becomes automatic, not logical. The person isn't responding to you, they're responding to memory. From the outside, this behavior feels unfair and confusing. You see affection one moment and coldness the next, but internally, they're trying to balance two competing needs: connection and self protection. The silence isn't about power games, it's about calming emotional overload. This is where many people misstep. They respond to mixed signals with pressure. They question, confront, demand clarity, or seek reassurance, While understandable, these reactions intensify the very fear driving the withdrawal. What feels like care to you feels like loss of control to them. And the more they feel cornered emotionally, the more they retreat. Understanding this doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or emotional neglect. It means recognizing the psychology behind the behavior so you don't personalize it or react impulsively. Emotional intelligence lies in responding calmly, not urgently. Stability invites safety, pressure invites distance. Over time, when someone realizes they can care deeply without losing themselves, the hot and cold behavior fades. Emotional security replaces emotional defense. But that transition only happens when the environment feels safe, not when it feels demanding. So when someone you know clearly cares yet goes silent, remember, mixed signals are often fear in disguise. And how you respond to that fear determines whether connection deepens or disappears. Human emotions naturally seek balance. When closeness becomes intense, the mind instinctively looks for space to restore equilibrium. This isn't a flaw in love, it's a built in psychological mechanism designed to regulate emotional overwhelm. The need for space doesn't mean affection is fading. Often, it means the emotions are strong enough to require breathing room. When two people connect deeply, emotional intensity rises, thoughts become more frequent, expectations increase, and vulnerability expands. For many, this level of closeness feels unfamiliar or even unsafe. The nervous system interprets emotional saturation as a loss of autonomy. Distance then becomes a way to reclaim a sense of self, not a signal of disinterest. Space allows emotions to settle. It reduces internal pressure and quiets the mind. When someone pulls back, they're often trying to recalibrate to process what they're feeling without stimulation. Silence gives them time to understand their emotions without reacting impulsively. In this sense, distance isn't rejection, it's digestion. Attraction also relies on contrast. Constant closeness flattens emotional experience, while space restores perspective. When you're always present, your value becomes familiar. When you're absent, awareness increases. This is why people often feel desire more strongly after time apart. The mind needs distance to feel longing. Ignoring or creating space can therefore be a subconscious attempt to revive emotional clarity. It gives the heart room to feel again instead of being overwhelmed. Many people don't articulate this need clearly because they don't fully understand it themselves. They just know that being too close too fast makes them uncomfortable. The problem arises when space is misunderstood. One person interprets it as rejection and responds with anxiety or pursuit. That reaction disrupts balance. Pressure collapses the space that was needed, increasing emotional discomfort and prolonging withdrawal. The cycle continues until one person feels exhausted or misunderstood. Emotional maturity lies in respecting space without disconnecting emotionally. It's the ability to remain calm, grounded, and self directed while allowing another person the room they need. That calm presence communicates security, reassures without suffocating. Healthy connection isn't about constant contact, it's about rhythm, closeness and space, engagement and independence. When that rhythm is respected, attraction stabilizes instead of fluctuating. People who ignore because they love deeply are often trying to preserve the connection, not destroy it. They're seeking balance so they can return with clarity instead of confusion. Understanding this shifts how you respond. You stop chasing reassurance and start embodying emotional steadiness. And emotional steadiness is what allows closeness to return naturally, because when space restores balance, love doesn't fade, it becomes sustainable. When someone ignores you after showing strong interest, it's easy to assume they're trying to hurt you or pull away permanently. But in many cases, ignoring is not about disconnection, it's about regaining emotional power. Power, in this sense, isn't manipulation. It's the ability to feel in control of one's emotions when vulnerability starts to feel overwhelming. Strong feelings place people in a position where they feel exposed. Caring deeply means risking disappointment, rejection, or loss. For someone who struggles with emotional security, that exposure feels dangerous. Ignoring becomes a way to pull their power back inward. By creating distance, they reduce how much influence another person has over their emotional state. This behavior often emerges when someone senses they're becoming emotionally dependent. They notice their mood changing based on your attention, your responses, or your availability. That realization can trigger fear. Ignoring is their attempt to reset the balance so they don't feel consumed by the connection. In these moments, silence acts like a shield. It gives them space to stabilize internally. It helps them convince themselves that they're still in control, that they haven't lost themselves in the relationship. From the outside, this feels cold or confusing. From the inside, it feels necessary. This is also why ignoring often follows moments of emotional closeness. After intimacy, vulnerability spikes. The more connected they feel, the more exposed they become. Pulling away temporarily helps them feel grounded again. It's not that the closeness was unwanted, it was powerful. Misreading this dynamic leads to common mistakes. When someone tries to regain power through distance and the other person responds with pursuit or emotional pressure, the imbalance intensifies. What was meant to be a short recalibration turns into prolonged withdrawal. Pressure signals danger, calm signals safety. Understanding this doesn't mean tolerating unhealthy patterns indefinitely. It means recognizing the psychology so you don't react in ways that escalate the situation. Responding with emotional composure keeps the door open for reconnection while protecting your own stability. True emotional strength isn't about forcing closeness or demanding explanations. It's about remaining centered even when things feel uncertain. That steadiness allows the other person to return once they've regained internal balance. Over time, people who feel safe maintaining power without cutting off connection develop healthier patterns. They learn that closeness doesn't require losing control, but that learning only happens in an environment free from pressure. So when ignoring shows up, don't assume the connection is gone. Often it's a sign that emotions are real and someone is trying to hold on to themselves while feeling them. One of the fastest ways to damage attraction is by overreacting when someone pulls away. Silence triggers anxiety, and anxiety pushes people to action. They question, chase, demand explanations, or try to force clarity. While these reactions feel reasonable, they almost always misread what's actually happening beneath the surface. Instead of resolving the distance, they magnify it. When someone who cares deeply creates space, it's usually because they're emotionally overloaded, not because they've stopped feeling. Overreaction adds pressure to an already overwhelmed state. What you see as care or concern is often experienced as intrusion or emotional demand. The more you push, the more they feel the need to protect themselves by pulling further away. Attraction thrives in emotional safety. Safety doesn't come from constant reassurance or control, it comes from calm presence. When you respond to distance with emotional intensity, you unintentionally communicate insecurity. Insecurity signals instability, and instability erodes desire. Even if the feelings are genuine, the delivery creates resistance. Another issue with overreaction is that it reframes the dynamic. Instead of two people choosing each other freely, it becomes one person trying to manage the other's emotions. That shift drains attraction. No one wants to feel responsible for another person's emotional balance. When pressure replaces freedom, affection turns into obligation. Overreaction also blocks clarity. Space allows emotions to settle and perspective to form. When you interrupt that process with constant contact or emotional demands, you delay resolution. You keep emotions in a heightened state instead of allowing them to normalize. The result is prolonged confusion instead of understanding. This is why emotional composure is so powerful. Calm responses communicate confidence and self respect. They signal that you're secure enough to allow space without panic. That steadiness lowers defenses. It makes it easier for the other person to reconnect without fear of being overwhelmed again. Misreading intent is another consequence of emotional overreaction. Silence gets labeled as rejection, manipulation, or lack of care. Once those assumptions form, behavior changes, resentment builds, tone shifts. What could have been a temporary pause turns into emotional damage caused by misunderstanding. Responding with composure doesn't mean ignoring your needs or tolerating unhealthy behavior indefinitely. It means giving situations time before assigning meaning. It means observing patterns instead of reacting to moments. Emotional intelligence lies in restraint, not suppression. You stay aware without becoming reactive. When someone senses that you can handle uncertainty without losing yourself, attraction stabilizes. They don't feel rushed. They don't feel cornered. They feel free to engage again when their emotions settle. Freedom, not force, is what brings genuine connection back. So when distance appears, resist the urge to fill the silence with fear driven action. Let calm replace urgency. Let understanding replace assumption. Because the ability to stay emotionally steady when things feel unclear is what preserves attraction and often allows it to return stronger than before. The final and most misunderstood piece of this dynamic is what happens when you stop centering your life around someone else's attention. When you redirect your focus back to your own purpose, routines, and emotional stability, the entire energy of the connection shifts. This isn't a tactic or a strategy, it's a return to self leadership. And it's where attraction either rebalances or reveals the truth. When someone senses that they are the emotional center of your world, pressure forms. Even if it's unspoken, they feel it. Expectations grow heavier, interactions feel loaded, and every moment carries weight. Over time, that pressure becomes exhausting. Pulling away is often an attempt to escape that emotional gravity. The moment you remove that weight, something changes. By focusing on your own growth, work, health, and direction, you reclaim your emotional independence. Independence is attractive because it signals wholeness. It communicates that connection is a choice, not a need. When attention is no longer demanded, it becomes valuable again. This is why people often return when you stop chasing, not because of manipulation, but because the emotional environment feels safe again. There's no urgency, no demand, no fear driven energy, just calm confidence. That calm allows curiosity and desire to resurface naturally. Focusing on yourself also restores clarity. Instead of analyzing every message or moment of silence, you reconnect with your own rhythm. You begin to notice how you actually feel, not just how you want the outcome to be. This clarity protects you from over investing in uncertainty. It grounds you in reality instead of fantasy. When someone does come back, this grounded state determines the future of the connection. You're no longer reacting from insecurity or longing, you're choosing from stability. That shift changes how you communicate, what you tolerate, and what you value. Relationships formed from this place are healthier because they're based on mutual desire, not emotional imbalance. And if they don't return, the focus on self ensures you haven't lost yourself in the process. You've grown instead of shrunk, you've strengthened instead of weighted. That outcome is still a win because it moves you forward instead of keeping you stuck in emotional limbo. True attraction is not created by effort alone, it's created by presence, purpose, and emotional steadiness. When those are in place, connection flows naturally. When they're missing, no amount of pursuit can replace them. So the real shift isn't in their behavior, it's in yours. When you lead your life with purpose and calm confidence, everything else either aligns with you or clears the way for something better.